What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another modern video, and we're going to get back to our roots here of, well, I guess in two ways. So we're going to be looking at the second most popular deck currently in the modern metagame, because of course I refuse to look at Scam because I just assume it's a dead man walking at this point. So today we're going to be taking a look at Black-Green Yawgmoth, of course some of the innovations as we do for a lot of decks here on the channel, to see what exactly has changed, some of the new interactions, and how the heck it's gotten to the point where it's the second most played deck in the modern metagame according to MTG Goldfish, and hopefully do my best to break it down and hopefully convince some people to play this deck, because I absolutely have a blast playing this deck, and it's a deck that I usually play a lot on the channel if there's really any gameplay that gets played. So before I get too deep into that, of course, if you are not already subscribed to the channel and you want to support my content, it's a free, easy way to do so. Just click subscribe, ring the notification bell, and of course, I like the videos as well if you enjoy them. And in the comments, please let me know if there's a certain deck that you want to see or any types of videos and stuff. Of course, I have like my own ideas and things, but I like to, my community is a little bit bigger. I like to, take suggestions and try to tailor my content more towards like the stuff that people want to see and kind of put my own spin on things, of course. And if you want more, if you want to have, I guess, direct contact with me in a way, I have a link in the description for my Discord server. Go ahead, follow that link, join over there. I would really appreciate it. It's really just brings me a lot of joy. Like, it's a lot of fun, just like watching new people, look at new people subscribe. People, have been leaving tons of nice comments and stuff like that on the channel. Of course, people joining the Discord server as well. So it makes me happy. Now, for what you all came here for, let's take a look at Black-Green Yawgmoth. For the uninitiated, because I usually like to, I probably have like a few times where I go over a deck, like at least a few times a year. So this version of Black-Green Yawgmoth, everything, like the main combo is still the same. That has not changed. So we have Yawgmoth, Therian Physician, what the deck is based around. It's a 4 mana 2/4 with protection from humans. It has pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and draw a card. So you do not have to target a creature to use the ability. But as a note, if you target a creature and it is not there when the ability goes to resolve, you do not draw a card. You still have to obviously pay the life and sacrifice the creature, but obviously if you target something and it's not there, you fail to draw a card. Something just to keep in mind, and could be important in like other games and stuff later. You also can pay 2 black and discard a card to proliferate. Proliferate. That's a hard word apparently. Which basically means that you could put a -1/-1 counter on all your opponent's creatures, and you can start like adding counters to them slowly over time, or in a big burst, depending on how much mana you have, and so on. Yawgmoth obviously has proven that long term, after the original Modern Horizons came out, that it has proven to be one of the bigger players in the modern metagame over something like Urza, which we know is another 4 mana creature from that set, 4 mana legendary creature from that set that saw tons of play early on and has kind of fallen off for sure. So this is obviously a pretty powerful ability. You can trade creatures to shrink your opponent's creatures and draw cards. So how are we abusing this? Because it's modern, everything has to be abusable. So we're using Undying creatures, which Undying is a mechanic that says when the creature dies, if it doesn't have any +1/+1 counters on it, you return to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. Easy enough. You can have a Yawgmoth and a Strangergeist, or 2 Yawgmoths, whatever the case may be. And in some cases, a Yawgmoth and a Hapatra, or a Strangergeist and a Hapatra. And you can kind of put counters back and forth on them. So if you have 2 Yawgmoth in play with neither of them having a counter, you can sacrifice 1 Yawgmoth, choose not to target anything. It'll come back with a +1/+1 counter. You'll draw a card. And then the Yawgmoth that doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it, you sacrifice to target the Yawgmoth with a +1/+1 counter. It will put the -1/-1 counter on it, canceling the +1/+1 counter. You have the second wolf that you just sacrificed come back with a +1/+1 counter, and you now have a Yawgmoth with Undying still that is able to be sacked and return with a +1/+1 counter to remove the other one, so on. So essentially, like, you're passing a +1/+1 counter back and forth between like the Yawgmoth, even though like it visually that's what it looks like. Mechanically, that's obviously not what's happening, and allows you to draw as many cards equal to your life total -1, because we would rather not die performing this combo. So you have Young Wolf, you have like your ideal setup for the combo. Hapatra essentially plays like the role of an undying creature, where you can sacrifice Young Wolf, put a counter on Hapatra to then make a snake, or if you already have a snake, then you can, sacrifice the Young Wolf, choose no targets, bring it back, draw a card, and then you can sacrifice the snake to put a -1/-1 counter on the Young Wolf, draw a card, and because you put a -1/-1 counter on a creature, you make a snake, so on. So that's kind of how you kind of combo through that. Hapatra also, if you have a creature that kind of is like a starter and you're playing against a creature deck, Hapatra can just, sack the snake, put a -1/-1 counter on your opponent's creature, you draw a card, you make a snake, you do the same thing over and over again, and kind of clear your opponent's board that way, or as much of it as you can, kind of with that combo. So that is the main idea of the deck. That's kind of what you're setting up. Your win condition is a Blood Artist, which says when it or another creature you control, when it or another creature dies, target player loses a life and you gain a life. So while you're kind of like passing this counter back and forth among your creatures, or sacrificing snakes and things like that, you are gaining a life. So you're offsetting the cost to activate the Yawgmoth while also dinging your opponent for 1 damage, and then eventually, obviously, you do it enough times, you win the game. In paper, it's super easy because you just, if you've already established the loop and then you put your win condition into play, most people concede, or maybe they have some way of interacting with it. But by and large, it's just easy, quick. Like you're able to loop through it and like, all right, I have my way to win the game. This is how I'm going to kill you, and it happens while I'm kind of doing this loop. Which is great, awesome. Moto, obviously, it's a little bit more tedious. As we've seen, if you watch some of my other streams and any of my other videos, people do not like to concede to the combo when you already establish it. They make you click through it, which can be a little annoying, but thankfully there is a rather quick way of doing it. So, that's kind of nice. So that is the combo, kind of the meat potatoes, the thing that we're kind of setting up to try and win the game. So how do we kind of forward this game plan? So you have a card like Delighted Halfling, which lets you add a mana of any color for your legendary spells and makes them uncounterable. So a pretty good ramp. The colorless mana, you're playing less double costed, like double mana pips. That's why there's one Strangler Geist on the deck. This deck used to play like, I believe, like 3 at one point, and then it played 4 months and months ago, and then it's gone down to 1. To kind of flex the importance of like Delighted Halfling. So you have like Delighted Halfling to fix mana. You have Ignoble Hierarch, which is probably one of the best mana dorks to be playing, just because it's in the colors that you want to be playing. Of course, the Exalted could matter, just trying to push in some chip damage and things like that. You have Blood Artist as your win condition. Hapatra is like another way that you can set up towards a win condition. Orcish Bowmaster, we know, is still very powerful against the One Ring. People playing Lorien Revealed are actually casting Lorien Revealed. So Orcish Bowmaster in that way too is like a way that you can, you know, hit your opponent for a ton of damage, make a 3/3 or a 4/4. On top of that, too, Bowmaster makes 2 creatures, so it kind of helps out Quarter Calling as well. Just being able to play this and essentially go mana neutral on it when you're getting ready to cast like a Quarter Calling. Same thing with Wall of Roots. You play it, it adds a green mana to hopefully play something else, and it can do it once each turn. So you could, play a Wall of Roots, then play a creature, and then on the next turn you're able to add the mana and of course pay for convoke costs with Wall Roots. On a side note too, with Wall Roots, while we're talking about it, if you have a Wall of Roots that has 4 -0 -1 counters on it, or just 4 counters on it, and it has 1 toughness, you are still able to Eldritch Evolution and Quarter Calling by adding mana for it, and then using it to pay cost of sacrificing it in the case of Eldritch Evolution and tapping it for Quarter Calling. In paper, in Moto, you are not able to do so. So Moto, it's like a little bit nerfed in that sense, but if you're playing this in paper, it does work in fact that way because of how paying costs and stuff like that works. Of course, we're not going to get too deep into that because I'm not a judge. I just kind of know how it works for the sake of being able to perform it in paper. But Wall of Roots does have some interesting tricks. It's a big blocker. Against like Rhinos, you could just play as a 2 mana 0/5, and they got to put in some resources to kind of start being able to hit over it. And of course, you can use the mana and whatever to your advantage later on. 4 Grist, a Hunger Tide. A neat card because when it was spoiled and subsequently released, people were trying to play it in decks where you could Collected Company for it, you could Court of Calling for it, you can technically Eldritch Evolution for it because of its ability of making a 1/1 insect creature in addition to its other types when it isn't on the battlefield. So, you mill this, it counts as an insect, Grist will, re-trigger itself. Grist can trigger its conditional effect on its +1 with itself. You can bring it back with, I believe, Unearth. I believe that's the card that is playable in Modern. There's a lot of different things you do with Grist, but in this deck in specific, you can Court of Calling for it, to start making 1/1s and kind of give you some more ammo with Yawgmoth. Minus, it's removal that's tutorable with the 5 cards in your deck, and of course gets a benefit of being uncounterable in that with Delighted Halfling. And the minus ability, you can just win the game outright with it by the fact that you want to kind of, you know, you sacrifice your creatures to shrink your opponent's creatures, draw more cards. Eventually, you can discard cards to hand size on top of Yawgmoth's ability as well, where you can kind of proliferate, which will also help Grist get up to that ultimate to where you can just win the game that way by even playing like a mediocre beatdown plan in that case as well. Grist can kind of, finish it off by dealing 8 to 10 damage to your opponent. Court of Calling just searches for a creature, converted mana cost X or less, puts it onto the battlefield. We have a plethora of options that we can go get. You have Eldritch Evolution to essentially do the same thing. You can upgrade your tokens and stuff like that from, like your Colony Garden, and even from your Grist to go into some of these powerful twos, in, like Hapatra or like a Bowmaster or something like that, or even a Wall of Roots if you need more mana. Hogger Mauling is actually is interesting, but I guess it is like a 3-mana removal spell that is also a land a lot of the time because your opponents really aren't likely to have just a ton of basic lands sitting around. So, kind of, I guess, kind of worth it, and also going to play as a land is kind of a nice bonus as well. Allows you to kind of go down a little bit on your land count. Playing 22 lands, but one of them's a spell. Agatha's Soul's Cauldron is the final spell in the deck, and it opens up an even bigger can of worms than what we previously had with the Yawgmoth deck. So everything that I just explained is basically how Yawgmoth has operated up until like Wilds of Eldraine released, and then Agatha's Soul's Cauldron kind of turned on its head. So you can spend mana as mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters have activated abilities of all creatures exiled with Agatha's Soul's Cauldron, and then you can tap it to exile a card from a graveyard, and if it's a creature card, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. Which is why we're playing this Walking Ballista and why I've glossed over it, this whole time. You have some variations that are playing cards like Haywire Might in the deck, and people playing like Walking Ballista main deck and Fulminator or Mages and things like that. Essentially, you can cast a Walking Ballista for 0, put it in your graveyard. You can exile exile it with Agatha's Soul's Cauldron, put a +1 counter on, say, like a Yawgmoth, and if you have a Yawgmoth, you can just sacrifice the Yawgmoth to put a counter on it. Draw a card. Shoot, not having to target anything. Remove the counter to shoot your opponent, and then sacrifice it again, and then bring it back, and then it has a counter, shoot your opponent, so on. On top of that, too, like other Undying creatures that you play, you can just kind of do the same thing, and it essentially makes your deck even harder to interact with, because instead of having to have 2 Undying creatures or having an Hapatra and so on, which really Hapatra, I guess, doesn't work in the scenario, but you know what I mean. Instead of setting up the combo with like 2 different creatures, now you just need a Yawgmoth and an Agatha's Soul's Cauldron, and even in some cases, you don't even need the Yawgmoth, because if it's already in your graveyard and you exile it with Agatha's Soul's Cauldron, you could just sacrifice to put a counter on it, and then you can. Well, I guess you still need it. So either way, like you just need then just any 2 creatures that have a +1/+1 counter on them to be able to do it, and then of course at that point as well, you can use the proliferate ability, put more counters on your creatures, remove counters, shoot your opponent, so on. So Agatha's Soul's Cauldron is like just an insane, crazy way that you can win games. Of course, you can exile Grist and have your creatures be able to activate the abilities of Grist as well. In Yawgmoth being a big one, Strangle guy or Wall of Roots, excuse me, being one. And of course, like the sideboard, Haywire Might and Fulminator Mage are cards I alluded to. And it's just insane. The mana base, you have a ton of just lands that like tap for mana. You don't really play a lot of utility lands. You have like Takanuma that can go and get like a creature or planeswalker back. You have Pendlehaven to kind of pump like your little creatures and help them survive combat in a way. Like it definitely helps you with like blocking and things like that, and of course being aggressive when you need to be. You have Peatlands to draw cards, Colony Garden that makes tokens, and of course two Boseiju to mess with like needles and other annoying permanents. Even get to deal with like the Wicked Roll token as well to kind of shrink your opponent's creatures, which could come up. And of course, like the sideboard, this like changes. I mean, a lot of it stays the same, but at the same time, a lot of it never changes. So definitely down on endurances, the normal. I believe like one Hairwire Might is pretty like normal. The Fatal Pushes. Playing Necromantia is like kind of a card that is like in and out of the sideboard. Of course, Shieldred is a very powerful card in Modern. If you play this and no one can answer it, it just ends up winning the game on its own. And of course, the One Ring as well. Super powerful. Like, why does everyone else get to play with the ring? Why doesn't Yawgmoth get to play with the ring? So yeah, that is the Yawgmoth deck for the modern format. Definitely longer than a lot of my other deck techs. As you can probably tell, I'm definitely a lot more comfortable with the Yawgmoth deck than I am a lot of the other decks in the modern. I mean, this is the one that this is the modern deck that I choose to play. This is the deck that I play a lot of, and I might not necessarily be like an expert or anything like that, but I've definitely done a lot of research and a lot of studying on this deck, and I have a few more videos. I believe I have a guide on Yawgmoth. I think it's like post Agatha's Soul's Cauldron, so maybe I'll kind of update it in a way to kind of get that beginner's guide like started and have it be a little bit more up to date. So if that's something you want to see, please leave a like on the video, comment down below if there's any other modern decks that you want to see. Of course, if you are not subscribed to the channel, you want to support my content, keep me doing this stuff. I love making videos, and just keeps inspiring me more to do it as kind of more people join this community. So I would appreciate it if you're not already subscribed to please do so, and of course join the Discord server. That's gonna do it for me. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one.